Today we're back on the way of Jesus, because the way of Jesus is the way of life. And we discovered if we want the life of Jesus, we need to live the lifestyle of Jesus. And this was his lifestyle. We talked about the way of Jesus as water, refreshment, solitude, the Sabbath, serving others, prayer, community, the Word. And today we're talking about the way of Jesus is witnessing to others about Jesus. You know, as we follow Jesus, it seems that we should have this natural inclination to tell others about this Jesus we're following, right? But often we become sheepish, almost scared to speak about Jesus. But we shouldn't, because just as we should have a desire to tell others about the Jesus we are into, the world has a similar desire to tell us about whatever way of life, whatever philosophy that they are into. And there are so many different philosophies and isms out there, each representing a different philosophical, political, or social belief system. There's liberalism, conservatism, capitalism, socialism, hedonism, humanism, pluralism, legalism, libertarianism, conclusivism, egalitarianism, and on and on and on and on and on. Everyone so excited about living their life, telling others about the ism that is the center of their lives, and trying to convince you to make your ism from their ism, that your way of life might become the life that they find to be true for them. And so we're all involved in this. And the reality, I think, is if you're not telling people about the good news of Jesus, you are the exception rather than the norm. I remember pulling into County Market parking lot not too long back at the corner of Duncan and Kirby. And I was pulling in, there was a car in front of me that had a bumper sticker on the back of its bumper. And it had a number of words, but the only word I could make out clearly was the word God. So I wanted to see what this bumper sticker said. So I began to tailgate this car into the parking lot of County Market. And I thought, well, maybe that's not such a good idea. They might think I'm doing something creeping on them or something. So I backed off, and the car parked, but I made sure I parked not too far from it. And then a young mother and her children got out of the car and went into County Market. Well, as soon as they walked away, I got out of my car and walked nonchalantly over to their car to see what the bumper sticker said that had the word God on it. And it read, "My God is too big to fit into any one religion." And then it surrounded God with all these religious symbols, you know, the Christian cross, Judaism's Star of David, the Buddhist wheel, Islam's star and crescent. My God is too big to fit into any one religion. And that's true. God is too big to fit into anything. He is God. But the message of the sticker was that since God is too big to fit into any one religion, he must be the God of all religions. Another ism, omnism. Look it up. Omnism. And if all religions are equally true and equally valid, and since all religions are equal, any of them will get you to God. Just pick one, any of them. So a lot of people spend their entire lives trying this religion, that religion, trying to find some kind of spiritual truth for themselves, one to the other, seeking, searching. But as the old saying goes, if you aim at everything, you end up hitting nothing. And there are a lot of people in our world are finding nothing that can answer the biggest questions of life. Nothing that is sufficient to deal with the hardest issues of life. Nothing that will give them a true sense of hope beyond this life. But to make that life-changing decision and to stop seeking and to start following Jesus does not just happen by accident. You know, and if as we believe, making that decision to follow Jesus is as radical as being blind then seeing, as being deaf then alive again, then finding Jesus cannot and will not happen without the direction and intervention of God. God has to be involved in the entire process from start to finish. In fact, Jesus himself said, "No one can come unto me unless the Father who sent me draws him." Jesus said, "No one can come to me. No one can find me. No one can understand the truth of me. No one can experience the life of me unless God draws them to me." Start to finish. And we find this true in our passage today. The year's around 36 AD in Israel. Jesus has been crucified, resurrected, gone back to heaven. The Holy Spirit has come. The church has been released upon the world. And one of Jesus' disciples, Philip, is sent by God to a political official to tell that official the good news of Jesus. In the book of Acts, chapter 26. Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, "Go south to the road, the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza." So he started out, and on his way he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of all the treasury of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians. This entire event was initiated by God, and everything that happens beyond this happens only because of God. If God had not stepped into this moment by sending his angel to Philip, this day would have never happened. It would have been a day just like any other day for Philip. It would have been a day just like any other day for this Ethiopian official. Their paths would have never crossed. Their conversations would have never happened, and a life would have never been changed. But to change a life, God had to step in this moment to make this moment happen just as he always does. And he sends his angels to tell Philip, "Go south to the road, the desert road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza." And what's so incredible about Philip is that he has created space in his life to be able to hear God when he is speaking. One thing I've been learning in my life recently that has been really changing me in my spiritual journey is the need and the importance of creating space in our lives just to be in the presence of God. And as one of his disciples, he had been with Jesus, and he had been in his presence, and he has created such a space and such a time, and was in such close communion that when God was able to speak, Philip was able to hear what he was saying. He was able to hear him speaking. And not only hear him speaking, but know exactly what God was saying. But so many people say that they have trouble hearing God. There's so many voices speaking in our world, and the volume is so loud, and the background noise is so great that it's hard to hear God say anything to us anymore. And Henry Blackaby, in his book, Experiencing God, Knowing and Doing the Will of God, says that if we have trouble hearing God, we are in trouble at the very core of our spiritual being. God is always speaking. We just have to position ourselves to be able to hear him. But even more incredible than the fact that Philip heard God and understood what God was saying is the fact that Philip did what God said to do. Even though Philip did not know where he would be going, even though Philip did not know when he would, what it would look like when he arrived there, even though Philip did not know what he was to do or what was to happen, God said go, and Philip went. You know, a large part of following God is being willing to take that first step. The first step is the hardest step. The first step of faith. The first step of uncertainty. The first step of not knowing where the journey will end once you begin it. But because when God says go like Philip, we are to be like Philip and well, just go. And on his way, he met an Ethiopian who was on his way. Because Philip heard God's voice and understood God's voice and obeyed God's voice, he placed himself in a position to discover what God needed him to do. Philip had no idea that this Ethiopian would be on this road that same day that he was going to be on that road, any more than I knew Brent Thompson was going to be in the airport in Tampa International the same day that we were going to be there. He had no idea. Any more than the Ethiopian had any idea that Philip was going to be on that road that very same day. And Philip had no idea that their paths would cross. Philip simply did what God told him to do and went south to the road that led down from Jerusalem to Gaza. And on the way, he met the Ethiopian official. See, but not only was Philip being sent by God as God was involved in this interaction, the official's heart was being prepared by God. For this man, verse 37, this man had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and on his way home was sitting in his chariot reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. Hear these words. He was an Ethiopian. He was a non-Jew. But he had just gone to Jerusalem to worship the Jewish God. Who does that? God was working in his life, helping him understand there was something more that he needed him to find out and discover. And he began his spiritual journey, and it led him to worship the God of the Jews. And he was just returning from Jerusalem to worship. And on his way home was sitting in his chair reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. The book of Isaiah is written in Hebrew. Ethiopians do not and have never had known the Hebrew language. Right now, they currently have 9 dialects in Ethiopia. None of them are Hebrew. None of them ever were Hebrew. So he had to make the effort to learn Hebrew in order to read the book of Isaiah. Now, I want you to know I have studied the Old Testament. And it is not easy. Hebrew is not easy. And so he was making this effort because God was preparing his heart, working in his life to bring him to this very day, this moment in time that he was going to bring Philip this way, the Ethiopian this way, so they could have this interaction. And the God that the official was seeking would find out about Jesus, his son, and the good news that Philip had. That's how God works. This past week, you all know that we were vacationing in Florida and caring for Carol's parents while we were there. And it was very challenging for us. Mom and Dad, they weren't the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge for us was where Carol and I had our accommodations while we were caring for Mom and Dad. They're in a senior living care facility, so Kirsten stayed with Mom and Dad and had good, nice amenities there. But Carol and I, in order to save some money, decided to stay in Mom and Dad's home that has been on the market trying to be sold for the last 2 years. And it still hasn't been cleaned out, and we still got a lot of things to do and paperwork and all that. 2 years, it hasn't sold. Well, we're going to save some money. That's what we do, right? Well, we got to her house that night and walked inside. Florida, 95 degrees plus, 110% humidity. The thermometer said 84 degrees inside. Well, turned on the air conditioning, no big deal, right? Except the air conditioning did not work. It barely worked. The coolest we ever got it down to was 78 degrees in the middle of the night. That was the coolest. And so we have no air conditioning. Okay, we can deal with this, I guess. And so we go to take a shower, get in the shower. They have propane gas tank. The propane gas is gone. No hot water in the shower. No air conditioning to cool it down. No hot water to bathe in. You should have heard Carol when she jumped in the shower. Ooh, ooh, ooh. The quickest shower I think a human being has ever taken. It was cold, but it made us feel good because the house was so hot. And then to try to keep us cooler, they had an old double bed that they had in the bedroom, but we moved out to the middle of the living room because there were multiple vents pointing down on us, hoping that some way, shape, or form we'd get some sleep on a double-sized bed when we're used to a king-size bed. And it just did not work. I thought I was back in the Army. Man, it was brutal. It was exhausting. Our sleep was horrible. It was just challenging. And I say all that because we came to the last night that we were going to be there. That whole week I had, even though everything was so difficult, I had gotten up in the morning early and laid there in the living room on pillows behind my head as best I could, taking my quiet time, reading my Bible, praying, seeking God. That last night there, Tuesday night, we were there. We were with Mom and Dad in their apartment. And I went out to the washer and dryer room, which is just across the hallway, and to throw some garbage away in the big garbage can there. And as I was going in there, there was a gentleman, an elderly gentleman, in a wheelchair going in ahead of me. He had lost his leg from the knee down, his right leg. And as he rolled in to the washer and dry room, I noticed he had an emblem on the back of his chair as a symbol of the United States with U.S. Army around the edge of it. Now, I want you to know I was not in a particular spiritual mood at that moment in time. I was not thinking about God. I was not thinking about anything except I wanted to get in there and get out of there. I was exhausted, emotionally, physically tired, just wore out. I just wanted to go back. I didn't want to really talk to him, but for some reason, I said, "How many years did you serve?" And he said, 3. And then the conversation began. And he asked me, "How many years did you serve?" I said, 31. And then we moved to a level of conversation that God was bringing together. And I told him I was a chaplain all those years, and he said, "Well, I've never been a very religious person." That's usually the go-to when someone finds out I'm a minister or a chaplain. "Well, I'm not very religious." But he told me he served in the 82nd Airborne, had 51 jumps out of an airplane. I had 4. I told him, "Thank you for his service." And I said one of the things I enjoyed most about being a chaplain, the ministry, was called the ministry of presence, of being with people in a space and listening to their stories and being with them. I said, much like we are here in this room. And he began to tell me how his wife passed away 4 years ago. Been married 31 years, and he missed her so much, and he began to cry. And then I shared how often I would stand with soldiers in their grief and their pain, and that I'm thankful that we could be there in that space together. Then I said, do you have a Bible? He said, yes. And I said, well, if you're interested in anything spiritual, I would encourage you to look in the book of John in the Bible, because it's written that you might believe. He said, Scott, I've never been anything very religious, he said, at all, but he said, I sense God's doing something around me, in me. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know. I can't understand it completely. I don't know what it's going to look like. I just sense God is doing something. Well, I said, read the book of John. And I said, do you have a King James Bible? He said, no. I said, okay, good. Don't use King James. Nothing against King James. I think King James is awesome, but I can't understand it. If I can't understand it, I don't think you're going to be able to understand it. Thee, thou, thine, thus, saith the Lord, does not quite get it done. It's sort of hard to wrap your mind around it. But I said, read the book of John, if you feel so inclined. And he said, Scott, isn't there a verse in the book of John he said, doesn't go like, for God so loved the world? I said, yeah, that's John 3:16. And he said, yeah, for God so loved the world. And he continued on, that he gave his only begotten Son. And I said, that whosoever believeth in him, he said, yeah, they should not perish, but have everlasting life. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, I don't remember. And I asked, would it be okay if I prayed for us? And he said, yes, please. And in this washer dryer room on the 3rd floor of the senior living center, God had brought this man to this space at this point in time and brought me with caring for mom and dad to this space at this very point in time so I could begin to share with him and talk with him and pray with him about the good news of Jesus. That's how this all works together. And this morning I texted him. I got his cell. I said, text him. And I said, hey, in my quiet time today, I thought about you and I prayed for you. He texted back and said, thank you. And Philip has been sent by God at the exact time the official's heart is being prepared by God so that his life could be changed by God. And the Spirit told Philip, go to that chariot and stay near it. Then Philip ran up to the chariot and heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. Do you understand what you are reading? Philip asked. How can I, he said, unless someone explains it to me. So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. The eunuch was reading this passage of Scripture. Jesus was led like a sheep to the slaughter. And as a lamb before the shear is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation, he was deprived of justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth. And the eunuch asked Philip, tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else? Then Philip began with that very passage of Scripture and told him, what? The good news about Jesus. And as they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, here's water. Why should not I be baptized? And he gave orders to stop the chariot. Then both Philip and the eunuch went into the water, and Philip baptized him. and they came up out of the water. The Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, and the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing. Philip, however, appeared at Azotus and traveled about preaching the gospel in all the towns until he reached Caesarea. What a beautiful ending to a wonderful story. And in this story, both the officials and Philip's faith grew. The Ethiopian official came to faith, and tradition has it that he went back to his home country, to Ethiopia, and evangelized it. And Philip experienced being sent by God, encountered our heart being changed by God, and then seeing a life that came to faith in God through the good news of Jesus. So much so that he went about preaching the good news of Jesus to all the towns until he reached Caesarea. And that day, a life was changed, and the official began to follow Jesus. Made the decision. And today is Decision Sunday. And the God who changed the Ethiopian's heart, who encouraged Philip's heart, desires to change your heart. If you would, just bow your heads with me right now. We just move into this time of decision. Everything we do all month, all the prayers, all the songs, all the sermon preparation, all the ministering, inviting, going, preaching, sharing, helping, to this moment of decision. Jesus went around saying, "Come follow me, come follow me, come follow me." And then he waited to see who would say yes and begin the journey. And maybe today is your day to begin following Jesus, to give your life to Jesus, to say yes to Jesus, not knowing where the journey will take you, not know where it will end. Completely, finally, what it will look like on this earth. But to begin the journey and take that first step and follow Jesus today. Or to rededicate your life, to lean in to faith, to lean into Jesus, to lean into ministry, to lean into hope. And to say, "Jesus, take me. Take all of me. Take me. I don't want to follow you more. Follow you so much more." Decision to faith, decision to rededicate, the decision to follow Jesus now. As I stand here as Carol plays, is this your moment? Is this your time to come forward and just take my hand and say, "Scott, I'm ready now. Ready today." This is your time.